All right, hey guys, Mr. Kyle, Myers Mathematics, and let's just jump right into it. Today is going to be a pretty short day, or at least it should be. All we're going to do is multiply and divide positive and negative numbers. So I'm going to show you a little bit of some tricks along the way to multiply and divide numbers pretty easily without having to use a calculator and going faster than what you could do with a calculator. And if you don't believe me, we can test it out and see for yourself. But the main idea here is going to be that if I have positive and negative numbers, my answer is either going to be positive or negative. So if I have a plus and a plus, then that's going to be positive. A plus and a minus, or a minus and a plus, or a minus and a minus. Those are my other options. When I'm multiplying two numbers, I only have a few options. I'm either going to have plus plus, plus minus, minus plus, or minus minus. So if I have a number divided by another number, if they're both positive, it'll be positive. If they're both negative, it'll be positive as well. If the signs are the same, it's going to be positive. If the signs are different, it's going to be negative. So let's go ahead and start. Start off with some blue here. 10 divided by 5. I don't have to worry about that. There's no negatives. My answer is going to be positive. 10 divided by 5 is 2. Done. And then what you do here is you can either start with the negative if there is one, or you can just divide the numbers first and then deal with the negative. I would probably deal with the negative sign first and then just divide the numbers. So I have a negative divided by a positive. Negative positive is going to be negative. So that's going to equal a negative number. Okay, and then 24 divided by 12. Well, that's 2. So now I'm done. Switch colors here. Negative divided by negative is a positive. 20 over 2 is 10. Right? Negative, negative makes a positive. And then 300 divided by 20. Here's what I can do. I can slash a 0, slash 1 for 1, and then it's just 30 over 2, which is half of 30, which is 15. All right, next color. 65 divided by 5. I don't have to worry about the sign here because they're both positive. So I just divide. And that should be 13. Okay. Here, negative and a negative make a positive. 66 divided by 6 is 11. All right. And I can either put the box around the plus 11 or just the 11. It wouldn't really matter. If you don't put a sign, you assume it's positive. Let's see. 75 divided by 15, except it's negative. I have a negative here, so that's going to be a negative answer. And then that's going to go in, well, let's see, 30, 60, 5 times? Should go in 5 times there. If you count by 15s, 15, 30, 45, 60, 75. Over here, I've got a negative over a negative, so that's going to be a positive. This one's a little bit tougher, so what I can do is I can say, okay, well, just divide them by anything that you know to divide by. So 56 goes into 7 8 times. That's 7 times 8. This goes into 7 2 times. And then that's 8 over 2, which is 4. So if you're not sure to count by a certain number, I can count by 15s, but I don't have my 14s memorized. So instead of counting by 14s, I could just divide piece by piece and get the answer that way. And of course, if you can use a calculator, some of these will be a little bit faster, but there are some really neat tricks on some of these, so you don't have to use a calculator on all of them, and you actually can go faster than a calculator. So that's pretty cool. I also don't know how to count by 17s, but I know the answer is going to be negative here because that's a positive divided by a negative. And let's see. I want to say 4, 5, 6, 7, 6 maybe? Yeah, 6 looks good. It's going to divide by 6. Because 6 times 7 is 42, so it ends in a 2. And then I would carry a 4, and then 6 times 1 is 6, plus 4 more is 10. Right? Sometimes you can just stop when you've seen that this digit right here multiplies by something so that the last digit of the number is that. So I'll do that one more time. So if I have a 17, then I focus on the 7. And if I have 102, I'm going to focus on the 2. So 7 times something has to end in 2. And I'm not going to, combine that with anything else. So 7 times 3 would be 21. 7 times 4 is 28. 7 times 5 is 35. 7 times 6 is 42. So that ends in 2, so it's likely that it's going to be a 6. You see how I did that there? If you have any questions about that particular method there, you can let me know in the comments. But it's a kind of easy way to, as long as you know for sure that it does divide evenly, of course, then that's a pretty easy way to do it. So negative, negative makes a positive, and 74 over 4, sorry, 72 over 4. The cool thing about 4s is that I can take half and then take half again. So half of 72, that would be 36, and then half of 36 is 18. All right, you can take half and then take half again if you want to divide by 4. Next color, yellow. And this time they don't put the division sign. They just put, well, the division, the fraction bar for division. So we're still dividing, but it's not a number over a number. It's not written in the same format, which is not that big of a deal. You would just need to figure out, what's dividing by. Here, again, with the 7 thing, right? So I don't know my 7s very well, but I need to multiply that 7 by something and have it end in 3. So, let's see. 7 and 7 would be 49. 7 and 8, 56. 7 and 9 would be 63. So it looks like 9 is going to work. Let's try 9. 7 times 9 is 63. And 9 times 1 is 9, plus 6 is 15. Yeah, there we go. So it looks like the answer is 9 here. All right. This is a positive divided by a negative, which is a negative number, and then 12 divided by 3 is 4. So notice how I focus on the sign of the number first, and then I just divide the numbers. 48 divided by 6, that's 8. 120 divided by 20, this is negative and negative, so that's going to be a positive. And then if I slash some zeros here, it's just 12 divided by 2, which means half of 12, which is 6. All right, I think I just used yellow for 4 questions. Normally I use them for 2 at a time, but it's fine. 306 divided by 18. Okay. Well, remember, if you don't know how to count by a certain number, I'm going to have to multiply by something to have it end in 8. 8 times 6 is 48, so I'm thinking maybe it could be 6. Maybe that's not big enough, though, so let's find out. It has to be 306. That's a pretty big number. So maybe 16 instead. So this is just a guess and check method. If you don't have a calculator, this is a viable way to do it. If not, then maybe it's not the most viable way. That's kind of up to you to decide what you think is going to work the best here. Did I do that right? 48, 4, 6, 10, 8. Oh, that would be, yeah. It'd be 18. So that looks like that's not even big enough. So here's what we'll do. We'll do a different method on this. Let's get rid of all this. Let's write it as a fraction. 306 and 18. I know they're both even, so I know they at least both divide by 2. So let's start there. Half of 306, well, half of 6 is 3. Half of 30 is 15. So 153. And then 18 divided by 2 is 9. And then I know if a number divides by 9, if I can add up all the digits, and that number goes into 9. So 1 plus 5 is 6, plus 3 is 9. So this does divide by 9. I just don't know how many times. So I can do some long division and find out. That would go in once. That's going to go 6 times. 9 times 7, is 63. So it looks like we get 17 here. I thought I did try 17. Maybe I didn't. I don't know. Let me know if I messed up something in the comments. But I got 17 for that when I divide by 9. And if you're ever not sure, you can always just multiply it back out. We could do like 17 and 18, multiply those back out, make sure we get 306. If you can use a calculator on this, then, this would be a lot easier. But for something like this, it's really likely that your teacher wouldn't let you use a calculator. So here I need to multiply 3 by something to get 5. So it looks like that's going to be, 5. So if it ends in 5, that means it's divisible by 5, which means I probably had to multiply that by 5. Negative and a positive make a negative, so negative 5. All right, we're on the last page here. So let's pick it up and get this done with here. That looks like that's going to be a 5 again. Negative divided by a negative is a positive. And it looks like that's going to be 5 again. 85 is not that much bigger than 17 as far as like multiplying by numbers wise. And I need to multiply by 7 by something so that it ends in 5. And if I multiply something by 5, it's going to end in either 5 or 0. So 128 divided by 16. Okay. Well, 16 is just like 2 and 4 and 8. It's basically made up of a bunch of 2's. 16 is 2 times 2 times 2 times 2. 4 2's. So I could just take half 4 times. And that seems like a lot of work, but it's actually not. It's actually not. But let's go ahead and start with the sign. A positive divided by a negative is a negative. And then let's just take half of 128 and do it 4 times. All right, so 128. Half of 12 is 6. Half of 8 is 4. So 64, 32, 16, 8. It's going to be negative 8. And we can find out for sure if we just multiply the 6, the last digit here, and the 8. 6 times 8 is 48, so I'd have to end in an 8. And it does. So there we go. All right, number 19. Negative divided by a positive is a negative. And then we're dividing by 15. So one thing you can do with 15s is if you add 15 and 15, you get 30. And 30 is pretty easy to divide by. So if I divide by 30, then it divides by twice as many of those. So for instance, 60 is 2 30s, so it would be 4 15s. 90 is 3 30s, so it would be 6 15s. So if we can find out how many times it divides by 30, then you just double that, and that's how many times it can divide by 15. It's a little easier to divide by 30. Looks like it would go in 6 times, which means it would go in 12 times into 15. Right? Kind of a trick method again, but as I'm going here, I'm just using some alternative methods to finding out the answer. That way you can do it without a calculator, right? So here we have 13. 13 is always just a hard one to divide by, so it could just be easier to multiply or divide by hand. 234 and 13. Well, that would go in once, not twice, because 26, that's a little too high. But we get 13 here. And then we'd have 10, drop the 4. And we need some sort of number that's a little bit bigger, and it has to end in 4. So 6 wouldn't work, 7 wouldn't work. 7 times 3 is 21, so that'd end in 1. 8 times 3 is 24, so that would work. 8 times 3 is 24, and then we'd carry a 2, and then it'd be 8 times 1 plus 2, so 8 plus 2 is 10, so that works perfectly. So there we go. Goes perfectly into 18. Now, it's not just 18 though, because I kind of broke my own rule here. We had to do positive divided by a negative is a negative, and then it would be 18. Don't forget your sign. Okay, next one. Now we're doing product, and they saved product for last, I think, because product tends to be a little bit easier until we have bigger numbers, but even then you can just, set up your multiplication and do it that way. But you still do the same thing with the negative and the positive stuff. So a negative times a positive is a negative, and 11 times 9 is 99. Remember, deal with the sign and then deal with the number. Negative and a negative makes a positive. 7 times 12 is going to be, what is that, 104? No, 84. There we go. 84. Here we have negative and a negative make a positive. 8 times 11 is 88. Negative times a positive is a negative. And 6 times 4 is 24. And I keep forgetting to switch over 2, but it's okay. It's not the big deal. Negative and a negative makes a positive, so that's going to be positive. And 3 times 11 is 33. Negative times a negative is a positive. 5 times 9 is 45. All right, on to the next one. 9 times negative 7. Let's change color again. Positive times a negative is a negative. And 9 times 7 is 63. Negative and a negative make a positive. 9 times 3 is 27. Change color. Let's do starting from maybe like brown. Yeah, there we go. 12 times 12 is 144, but a positive times a negative is a negative 144. Kind of went backwards again on that one. Again, it doesn't matter whether you deal with the sign first or if you multiply the numbers or divide the numbers first, as long as you stay fairly consistent, because I say fairly consistent because I'm not super consistent myself, but as long as you remember to do both, it doesn't really matter what order you do them in, right? So if you do both, it's fine. You just got to do one and then the other. So I could do 11 times 6 first, which would be 66, and a positive times a negative is a negative. So there we go. All right, let's see here. Ooh, now we have 3 numbers. So you don't want to try to multiply all 3 numbers up. Usually not a good idea. But sometimes it's more helpful to multiply certain numbers first. Like, for instance, 6 times 5. That's going to be a nicer number because if I multiply any even number by 5, it's going to result in a number that ends in 0. 6 times 5 is 30, so that's negative 30 times 3. So that's going to be a negative, and 30 times 3 is 90. All right. If I'm multiplying by 1, nothing really happens, but if I multiply by negative 1, it flips the sign. So that's going to be negative 6 times 2, which is negative 12. All right. And then here we have 8 times negative 6 times 3, 8 times negative 6, and then times 3. So that's going to be 48. And negative, times that by negative 3. Negative times a negative is a positive. And then 48 times 3. Okay. Well, if you don't know what that is, and I actually don't know what that is off the top of my head, so, because I don't, again, I could either count by 3s or I could count by 48s, and I don't know how to count by 48s. I could get around to it, but instead of doing that, you might just find it easier to just multiply it out by hand off to the side. So 8 times 3 is 24. 2. 3 times 4 is 12. Plus 2 more is 14. Oh, 144. Look at that. That's 12 squared. Okay. So then that's going to be, oh, what am I doing here? 144. I was about to write 12 for some reason. There we go. Okay, 6 times 3 or 6 times 6. Either way. Let's do this. Actually, let me show you a different way to do this. This is kind of interesting. This is just 3 times 1, right? So nothing crazy going on there. 3 and 1. But 6 is 2 times 3. And that's also 2 times 3. So it might be easier if you can multiply certain numbers first. So I need to multiply all of this. And you're probably like, wait, but that looks like more work. Well, no, not really. If you know what 3 times 3 times 3 is, this is not so bad. 3 times 3 times 3. Well, 3 times 3 is 9. 9 times 3 is 27. So it's just 27. So 3, 3, 3. Get rid of that 1 as well. And 2 and 2. 2 and 2 is 4. If I multiply something by 4, I just double it twice. If I double 27, I get 54. And then if I double it again, I get 108. So that's one way to do it as well. If you break up the numbers into easier numbers and you just leave all the 2s and 5s for last, 2s and 5s are really easy to multiply by because a 2 paired with a 5 makes a 10, and then you're just adding a 0. So that's really easy. So always save your 2s and 5s for last if you like to do this little method here. So that's 108. And then we have 2 negatives makes a positive. And I have a positive right here, so that's going to be a positive 108. And last but not least here, we've got a bunch of 3s. So we already just said 3 times 3 is 9. That's negative 3. 9 times negative 3 is negative 27. Right? 9 times 3 is 27. A positive times a negative is a negative. Here we've got a bunch of 3s. So what we can do is we can actually just say this. Okay, 9 and 9. This is going to be negative. This one's going to be positive. Negative times a positive is a negative. Negative times a negative is a positive. And a negative times a positive is a negative. Whew. Lots of negatives and positives going on there. 9 times 9 is 81. Right? Another thing you can do is if you're multiplying a bunch of positive and negative numbers, just count up all of the negative numbers. And here's what happens. If you have an odd number of negatives, then you'll have a negative answer. If you have an odd number of negatives, then you'll have a negative answer. If you have an even number of negatives, then you'll have a positive answer. Positive answer. Almost spelled answer wrong there. So odd number of negatives, negative answer. Even number of negatives, positive answer. And it always works out that way. So if that's helpful, then awesome. And speaking of helpful, if this has been helpful, go ahead and give a like and subscribe and all that stuff. And this is part of a series on Algebra 1 worksheets. So if you want to see others like it, there will be a link coming up in either down over here or over there in the bottom left or bottom right of the video somewhere for the playlist for this. All the Algebra 1 worksheets. And if you haven't also gotten my free guide, it's called The 5 Math Mistakes Everyone Makes and How to Avoid Them. And you can get that on my website, myersmathematics.com, and I'll put a link for that in the description. Hope you guys have a great day, and